So now that we've seen these complex numbers, we're going to go back to something that we saw in the previous lesson where we solve for a complex answer. Now, instead of writing no real solutions, which it's still not a real solution, we're going to figure out what our complex or our imaginary answer would be. So on example 6a, we have this problem x squared plus 4 equals 0. We're going to subtract the 4 and get x squared equals negative 4. We take the square root of that and we get x equals the square root of negative 4. Again, anytime we have a square root, we're going to write plus or minus. But again, when we take the square root of a negative, now we have what's called that imaginary number, so we're just going to put plus or minus 2i. Same thing on letter B. Now we have 2x squared minus 11 equals negative 47. We add that 11 to both sides. We get 2x squared is equal to negative 36. Divide by 2, we get x squared is equal to 18, and it's negative. Now when we go to take the square root, we're going to go ahead and simplify that 18, so I'll ladder it out. 2 goes in 9 times, 3 goes in 3 times, 3 goes in again. So we can call this x equals plus or minus 3i square root 2. And we are done with those examples. So, finding the zeros is no different. It's still solving for x. Instead of writing f of x, we could have called this y. It doesn't really matter, but we're solving for x. So we have 4x squared plus 20 equals 0. We subtract that 20 over. We have 4x squared is equal to negative 20. Divide by 4, we have x squared is equal to negative 5. We take the square root of that negative again, and we have x is equal to plus or minus I square root 5. Now again, what we've seen so far, we typically take something out, but the square root of 5 is still not a perfect square. We're just going to leave it in there and bring out that I because we took the square root of a negative. So last piece here, you guys go ahead and write your answers. Pause the video, make sure you try these, and then once you have them, you can unpause and we'll see how you did. Okay, so I didn't show a ton of work because there wasn't really a lot to simplify. When we do need to ladder stuff out, though, we'll have to make sure that we pay attention to that. But for instance, on 14 and 15, there's nothing that I could have taken out of the factors of 13 or 38. So it would have simply been plus or minus I square at 13 and I square at 38 respectively. On number 16, when you subtract that 11 over, you have negative 8. I laddered out negative 8 and got 2 square root 2, so it's plus or minus 2i square root 2. 17, I would add the 8 over and end up with square root of 28, sorry, 28, and then it's 2i square root 7. 18 plus or minus 2i square root I again. 19 square root of 6 doesn't have any factors that can be taken out, so it's plus or minus I square root 6. 20, same thing for 7. I just have plus or minus square root 7. 21 plus or minus 2i after I simplify the square root of negative 4. I showed more work with 22 just because I figured there'd be kind of more of a confusion between the beginning and the end of it if there wasn't work there. Notice again, we just set it equal to 0 and we subtract the 1, divide by 9. Most of you guys are probably pretty okay with the problem up to this point. Then when we take the square root, keep in mind 1 and 9 are both perfect squares. So when we take the square root of this, we can just put plus or minus 1 over 3 because both of those terms are perfect squares. So the one thing to keep in mind is we did not have to end up rationalizing a denominator in this lesson at all. Just because it didn't happen to work out that way, you would still rationalize a denominator like we did in the first lesson if you needed to. So keep that in mind. It wouldn't be uncommon to see an answer where we end up having something like the square root of 2 over 2 with an I, either like in front of it or with that square root 2 up on top. Your textbook will have you write it a lot of different ways. Most of the time, if you see something like what we saw in that last problem, they would just put plus or minus I over 3 for that answer. It just kind of depends on the notation used by the book. But again, the big new thing is to understand how those complex numbers should look. Make sure you guys are asking questions, pausing, rewatching the video when you need to. Other than that, good luck on the homework. Thanks for watching, guys.